Welcome back to my channel. The doors weren't just closed that day, they were locked. Not for privacy, but because what was about to be discussed inside that room had the potential to reshape the entire future of the WNBA. Phones were silenced. Advisors waited outside. And inside, some of the most powerful voices in women's basketball sat around a table, facing a conversation none of them could avoid anymore. This wasn't a routine league meeting. It wasn't about scheduling adjustments, salary cap discussions, or playoff formatting. The topic dominating the room had a name that has quickly become impossible to ignore in the basketball world. Caitlin Clark. The Iowa superstar who electrified college basketball had already changed the conversation around the sport. But now the conversation had reached a much bigger stage, one that involved television networks, billion-dollar media deals, and the future direction of an entire professional league. At the center of it all was WNBA Commissioner Cathy Engelbert, who reportedly found herself facing one of the most complicated moments of her tenure. The issue wasn't just about one player's popularity. It was about how that popularity was colliding with massive expectations from new media partners. Behind those closed doors, executives weren't whispering about small adjustments. They were discussing something much bigger: how the league should position itself in an era suddenly driven by unprecedented attention and financial investment. Because for the first time in a long time, the WNBA isn't operating in survival mode. It's operating under a spotlight. Recent broadcasting agreements, including partnerships with major networks like NBC, represent billions of dollars in future media value. That level of investment changes everything. It raises expectations, increases scrutiny, and most importantly, it shifts the conversation about how the league presents its biggest stars. And according to multiple reports circulating around the basketball world, network executives have been watching the current moment unfold with a mix of excitement and concern. Excitement because the numbers are undeniable. Ratings are surging. Social media engagement is exploding. Merchandise sales are climbing. And much of that momentum can be traced back to one undeniable cultural phenomenon: the arrival of Caitlin Clark. But along with that excitement has reportedly come a wave of questions. How should the league manage this level of attention? How do you balance celebrating a breakout superstar while maintaining the identity of a league built on teamwork, equality, and collective recognition? Those questions are what turned an ordinary meeting into what some insiders described as an emergency strategy discussion. Because networks investing billions don't just want good games. They want stories. They want recognizable faces that bring casual viewers into the sport. They want stars who can anchor broadcast promotions, headline national advertising campaigns, and create the kind of cultural buzz that expands audiences beyond traditional fans. It's the same formula that transformed the NBA during the 1980s and 1990s, when figures like Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, and Larry Bird became more than just players. They became global sports icons. Some media executives reportedly believe women's basketball may now be entering a similar moment. And for them, Caitlin Clark sits right at the center of it. But that perspective isn't without controversy. Because the WNBA has spent decades building a culture that emphasizes team success and collective progress, rather than centering the league around a single superstar. Many veterans and longtime supporters believe that identity is part of what makes the league special. So when outside voices begin pushing narratives about focusing coverage heavily on one player, tensions can naturally rise. That's what makes the commissioner's position so complicated. Cathy Engelbert isn't simply managing schedules and contracts. She's navigating the intersection of business, culture, and the evolving future of women's sports. On one side are powerful broadcast partners eager to maximize the massive attention currently surrounding the league. On the other side are players, teams, and longtime fans who want to make sure the WNBA's values and traditions remain intact. Finding the balance between those forces is no small task. Because the reality is this: the WNBA is entering a completely new era. For years, the league operated with limited resources, smaller media coverage, and a constant fight for visibility. Teams flew commercial. Budgets were tight. Exposure was inconsistent. But those days are quickly fading. With new media deals bringing in billions and audience interest reaching levels never seen before, The expectations surrounding the league are changing rapidly. Networks want bigger audiences. Sponsors want bigger stars. And the spotlight on the sport has never been brighter. That's why the discussions behind those closed doors carried so much weight. They weren't just talking about one season or one player. They were talking about how the WNBA will define itself during the biggest growth moment in its history. Will the league lean into star-driven storytelling the way many major sports leagues have done before? Or will it continue emphasizing the collective identity that has been part of its foundation since the beginning? Those questions don't have easy answers. But one thing is certain. The arrival of Caitlin Clark has already changed the conversation. Not just among fans and analysts, but inside the boardrooms where the future of the league is being decided. And if the reports about that closed-door meeting are accurate, the discussions happening right now could determine how women's basketball evolves for the next decade. Because when billions of dollars, global media attention, and one of the most talked about athletes in the sport collide, the ripple effects can reach every corner of the league. And this story is only just beginning. Inside that locked room, the tension wasn't just about business strategy. It was about two completely different visions for the future of women's basketball colliding head-on. And right in the middle of that collision stood Cathy Engelbert, the commissioner tasked with keeping the entire league balanced while forces far more powerful than any single team were pulling it in opposite directions. Think about the position she's in for a moment. On one side of the table are the executives from some of the largest media companies in the world, corporate giants like NBC, Amazon, and Disney. These are billion-dollar organizations that don't measure success in rebounds, assists, or defensive rotations. They measure it in ratings curves, advertising revenue, and audience growth charts. From their perspective, the equation looks simple. They look at television data and see dramatic spikes whenever Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever take the court. They see social media exploding with highlights. They see sold-out arenas and merchandise flying off shelves. To them, that data tells a clear story. The league has found something incredibly rare in modern sports. A player capable of pulling in casual viewers who may have never watched the WNBA before. In corporate boardrooms, that kind of momentum isn't just exciting. It's transformational. But on the other side of the conversation sits a completely different group with a completely different philosophy. The players, the locker rooms, and the culture that built the league long before this sudden wave of attention arrived. For decades, the Women's National Basketball Association has been defined by something deeper than star power. The league was built on teamwork, resilience, and the sacrifices of athletes who fought for recognition long before television networks were willing to invest billions. Many veterans spent years playing overseas just to earn a stable living. They traveled commercial flights, played through injuries, and pushed the league forward without the massive spotlight that now surrounds the sport. For those players, the idea that one rookie could suddenly become the centerpiece of the entire narrative is complicated. Because basketball has always been a team sport, respect inside the league is traditionally earned through years of competition, leadership, and championship experience, not handed out overnight because of popularity. That's why the atmosphere inside that meeting was reportedly so tense. At some point during the discussion, it's believed that Engelbert had to deliver a message that was brutally honest, even if it was difficult to hear. The surge in attention surrounding the WNBA didn't appear out of nowhere. The sudden ratings jumps, the national television exposure, the dramatic increase in media coverage. Many insiders believe those changes can largely be traced back to one lightning bolt moment in sports culture: the arrival of Caitlin Clark at the professional level. For veterans who have spent a decade grinding through the league, that realization can be painful. Imagine dedicating your entire career to building a league, only to hear that the moment the spotlight finally arrives happens because of someone who just finished her college career. Even if the statement is rooted in data, emotionally it's a tough reality to accept. But the corporate side of the conversation doesn't operate on emotions. Networks operate on numbers. And the numbers right now show something impossible to ignore. When Caitlin Clark is playing, millions of additional viewers are watching. When she isn't, the audience drops. That's not a judgment about talent across the league. It's simply what the audience data currently reflects. And for networks investing billions into broadcasting rights, those patterns matter enormously. But the story becomes even more complicated when you look at the timing of this entire situation. Because this closed-door meeting reportedly took place not long after one of the most debated moments in recent women's basketball history, the Olympic roster decision. When the USA Basketball announced its roster for the 2024 Summer Olympics, one name that many fans expected to see was missing: Caitlin Clark. The decision immediately sparked massive debate across sports media. Some analysts defended the choice as a basketball decision focused on experience and team chemistry. Others questioned whether leaving one of the sport's most popular players off the roster missed a huge opportunity to expand global interest. And here's where the media business side of the story becomes important. The Olympic Games are one of the most valuable television events in the world. Networks invest enormous amounts of money into broadcasting rights, hoping to attract massive audiences during primetime coverage. A storyline featuring a global rookie phenomenon like Caitlin Clark competing on the Olympic stage could have created an enormous narrative draw for viewers. Imagine the promotional campaigns. Imagine the primetime matchups. Imagine the storyline of a young superstar facing the best players on the planet. For television executives focused on ratings, that kind of storyline practically writes itself. So when Clark's name didn't appear on the Olympic roster, some insiders reportedly viewed it as a missed opportunity, not just for fans, but potentially for television audiences as well. That moment, according to whispers around the industry, may have been one of the sparks that intensified the conversations happening behind closed doors. Because to the networks investing billions into women's basketball coverage, moments like that feel like letting a powerful promotional opportunity slip away. Meanwhile, to coaches and basketball decision-makers, roster construction is about far more than popularity. It's about experience, chemistry, strategy, two completely different ways of thinking about the game. And when those perspectives collide, business versus basketball, the result can be exactly what we saw in that locked conference room: intense discussions about the direction of the league. What makes this moment so fascinating is that both sides believe they're protecting the future of women's basketball. The networks believe they're pushing the sport into a new era of visibility and financial growth. The players and coaches believe they're defending the competitive integrity and culture that built the league in the first place. And standing in the middle of it all is Commissioner Cathy Engelbert, trying to navigate a path that keeps the league united while the spotlight on the sport grows brighter than ever before. Because if one thing is clear right now, it's this: the WNBA isn't just experiencing a surge in popularity. It's experiencing a turning point. And how the league handles this moment could shape the future of women's basketball for years to come. The conversation inside that locked conference room reportedly reached a point where the tone shifted from debate to realization. Because by that stage, everyone in the room understood something important. The league was entering territory it had never experienced before. For decades, the Women's National Basketball Association had fought for attention, stability, and respect. Growth came slowly. Recognition came even slower. But suddenly, the spotlight on the league had exploded, and much of that attention was connected to the arrival of one player, Caitlin Clark. That reality is what reportedly turned the meeting into what some insiders jokingly described as a never-again summit. The speculation circulating around league circles suggests that executives and league officials may have started discussing how future agreements, partnerships, and broadcasting expectations should be handled going forward. When billions of dollars are being invested by media companies, the conversation inevitably becomes more strategic. Networks don't just want games. They want moments. They want stories. And most of all, they want stars who attract massive audiences. Companies like NBC, Amazon, and Disney aren't approaching the league purely from a traditional sports perspective. They're looking at the WNBA as part of a much larger entertainment ecosystem. Their analysts study viewership spikes, social media engagement, streaming data, and marketing impact. And when those numbers point clearly toward certain players driving audience growth, it naturally influences the conversations happening behind the scenes. From a business standpoint, the logic is straightforward. If a particular player draws millions of viewers, networks will want that player featured prominently in national broadcasts, promotional campaigns, and primetime matchups. But that kind of thinking doesn't always align neatly with how athletes and teams view the sport itself. Inside locker rooms, respect has always been built through years of competition, leadership, and championship success. Many veterans across the WNBA have spent long careers grinding through tough seasons, traveling overseas during the off-season, and helping build the league's foundation long before the current surge of popularity arrived. For them, the idea that the entire spotlight could suddenly revolve around one newcomer is emotionally complicated. That's why the tension surrounding this moment is about more than television ratings. It's about identity. Is the WNBA going to follow the same star-driven model that many major leagues use, where a handful of players become the face of the sport? Or will it continue emphasizing the collective strength of teams and the broader league culture that has defined women's basketball for decades? Some of the speculation surrounding the closed-door meeting also touched on another sensitive topic: officiating and player safety. As the spotlight around certain players grows, so does the scrutiny on how games are called. Fans have debated the physical nature of WNBA play for years. The league has long prided itself on a tough, competitive style that many believe sets it apart from other professional leagues. But when one player becomes a central figure in national broadcasts and promotional campaigns, questions inevitably arise about how that player is protected on the court. This doesn't mean changing the outcomes of games or favoring certain teams. Instead, the conversation is often framed around maintaining consistency in officiating and ensuring that the league's biggest stars remain healthy and able to perform. Historically, many sports leagues have faced similar discussions. During the peak years of the National Basketball Association, global icons like Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, and LeBron James became central figures in marketing campaigns and broadcast storytelling. Their presence helped expand the league's audience worldwide. But those eras also sparked debates about how referees called games, how physical play was managed, and how the league balanced competitive fairness with protecting its most marketable stars. Now, some analysts believe the WNBA may be approaching a similar crossroads. If the league continues attracting larger television audiences and major corporate partnerships, it will face increasing pressure to ensure that its biggest stars remain healthy, visible, and accessible to fans. And that leads to the final, and perhaps most emotionally complicated part of this story. For years, WNBA players have fought for better salaries, improved travel conditions, and greater visibility. Many athletes spent their off-seasons playing internationally just to supplement their income. Some traveled far from their families for months at a time simply to continue pursuing the sport they loved. The journey to reach this moment of financial growth hasn't been easy. But now that the league is finally attracting massive attention and investment, there's an uncomfortable reality that some players feel. Much of the new spotlight seems tied to a single cultural phenomenon: Caitlin Clark. Whether that perception is entirely fair or not, it has undeniably shaped the public conversation surrounding the league over the past year. For some players, that attention represents an incredible opportunity, proof that women's basketball can reach new heights of popularity. For others, it can feel like the years of hard work that built the league are being overshadowed by the sudden arrival of a new superstar. That emotional divide between locker room culture and corporate strategy is what makes this moment so fascinating. Because the WNBA isn't just dealing with rising popularity. It's navigating the growing pains that come when a sport moves from fighting for survival to suddenly standing at the center of the global sports conversation. And if the reports about that intense meeting are even partially accurate, one thing is clear: the decisions being made right now by executives, players, and league leadership could determine how women's basketball evolves for the next decade. As the Women's National Basketball Association continues attracting larger television audiences and major corporate partnerships, the pressure surrounding the league is only going to intensify. With billions of dollars now tied to broadcasting rights and sponsorships, the expectation from media companies is simple. The league's biggest stars must remain healthy, visible, and constantly connected to the fans who are fueling this surge in popularity. And that reality brings us to the most emotionally complicated part of the entire situation. For decades, WNBA players have fought relentlessly for the things the league is finally beginning to receive: higher salaries, improved travel conditions, national media exposure, and genuine respect within the sports world. Many players spent their off-seasons playing overseas in Europe, Asia, and other international leagues just to supplement their income. Those months away often meant being separated from family, friends, and the lives they built back home. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy. But it was the sacrifice that helped keep the league alive long enough to reach this new era. The road to financial stability for women's basketball has been long, exhausting, and filled with obstacles. Players before this generation fought through empty arenas, minimal television coverage, and a constant struggle for recognition. Every season was a grind, and every small step forward felt like a hard-earned victory. Now, suddenly, the environment around the league looks completely different. Ticket demand is exploding. Television ratings are climbing. Corporate sponsors are lining up. The momentum surrounding women's basketball has never felt stronger. But along with that momentum comes an uncomfortable perception that many players and analysts have quietly acknowledged. A huge portion of this new spotlight appears to be connected to one cultural phenomenon, Caitlin Clark. Whether that perception is completely fair or not is still heavily debated. After all, the WNBA was built by generations of athletes who pushed the sport forward long before the current wave of attention arrived. Without those pioneers laying the foundation, today's growth might never have been possible. But in the modern sports world, narratives matter just as much as history. And the narrative that has captured global attention over the past year revolves heavily around Clark's arrival at the professional level. Her record-breaking college career, deep-range shooting, and fearless playing style created a level of hype rarely seen in women's basketball. That excitement followed her directly into the WNBA, bringing millions of curious viewers along with it. For many within the league, that attention is an incredible opportunity. New fans are discovering the sport. More young girls are watching and dreaming of playing professionally. The entire ecosystem of women's basketball is benefiting from the increased visibility. But for others, the moment can feel more complicated. Some veterans understandably worry that the years of dedication and hard work that built the league might be overshadowed by the sudden rise of a single superstar storyline. When the spotlight focuses heavily on one player, it can unintentionally minimize the contributions of dozens of elite athletes who helped elevate the game long before the cameras arrived. That's where the emotional divide begins to appear. On one side, you have locker room culture, a culture built on teamwork, shared sacrifice, and the belief that the league's strength comes from collective excellence. On the other side, you have corporate strategy, a business environment where star power drives ratings, sponsorship deals, and media growth. Both sides want the same ultimate outcome, the continued success of the WNBA. But they approach that goal from very different perspectives. This tension isn't unique to women's basketball. Nearly every major professional league has faced similar moments when popularity suddenly explodes and forces the sport to adapt quickly. Growth brings opportunity, but it also brings difficult decisions about branding, storytelling, and identity. Right now, the WNBA appears to be standing at exactly that kind of crossroads. It's no longer a league fighting simply to survive. It's becoming a league fighting to define what its future will look like. Will it lean more heavily into star-driven narratives that attract massive audiences? Or will it continue emphasizing the collective spirit that has always defined the game? The answer will likely be somewhere in between. But if the reports about that intense meeting behind closed doors are even partially accurate, then one thing is absolutely certain. The conversations happening right now between executives, players, media partners, and league leadership are shaping far more than just the next season. They are shaping the next decade of women's basketball. And the decisions made during this critical moment could determine how the sport grows, how it presents its stars, and how the WNBA balances its proud history with a future that suddenly looks bigger than anyone ever imagined. The atmosphere in that room reportedly shifted once the core issue was placed on the table. From that point forward, the conversation was no longer about simple basketball decisions. It had become something much bigger, something tied directly to the future economics of the Women's National Basketball Association. When major networks invest billions into a sports property, they expect the league to operate with a different mindset. Companies like NBC are not just buying games. They are buying stories, stars, and moments capable of attracting massive audiences. And right now, many of those stories revolve around one name, Caitlin Clark. From a corporate perspective, the strategy seems obvious. Primetime broadcasts should feature the league's most recognizable talent. Promotional campaigns should highlight the players who generate the biggest reactions online and in arenas. Networks want the moments that create viral highlights, social media buzz, and sustained viewer engagement. But that perspective introduces a difficult tension. For decades, coaching decisions in professional sports have been guided almost entirely by competitive strategy. Who plays, who sits, and which matchups give a team the best chance to win. Now, the business side of the sport carries greater influence than ever before. When television deals become worth billions, the financial stakes naturally shape the conversation. That reality isn't always easy for athletes to accept, particularly for veterans who spent years fighting for every opportunity the league now enjoys. Many players built their careers during an era when the WNBA struggled for visibility, when arenas weren't always full and television exposure was limited. They endured the grind when the spotlight was much smaller. Now the league is booming, but much of the public credit appears tied to the sudden rise of Clark's popularity. Whether fair or not, that perception has created an emotional undercurrent across the sport. Professional athletes are intensely competitive. Pride and respect matter deeply inside locker rooms. When narratives begin to frame one player as the centerpiece of the league's financial future, it can create uncomfortable questions for everyone else. Push too aggressively to promote one star, and the league risks alienating the players who helped build it. Fail to capitalize on the momentum surrounding that star, and the enormous investments from broadcast partners could lose value. That delicate balance represents the paradox of growth in professional sports. For years, the WNBA's identity was built around collective effort and perseverance. The league emphasized teamwork, shared struggles, and the idea that success belonged to the entire community of athletes. Now the business environment is pushing toward a more familiar sports model, one driven by recognizable superstars who attract new fans. The challenge for leadership, including Commissioner Cathy Engelbert, is finding a way to navigate those competing forces without allowing the league's culture to fracture. Some observers believe that tension is already visible in the conversations happening around the sport. Rumors circulate about disagreements over media attention, marketing campaigns, and the way certain players are presented to the public. In professional sports, narratives are powerful, and whoever shapes the narrative often shapes the future of the league itself. There are also reports that media companies are exploring new ways to showcase the league beyond traditional broadcasts. One idea being discussed in sports media circles is a documentary-style series that would follow teams throughout the season, similar to the storytelling approach that helped elevate Formula One through the hit series Drive to Survive. Programs like that thrive on drama, rivalries, and personal storylines. They transform athletes into characters within a larger narrative that audiences can follow week after week. But that kind of storytelling also raises concerns. Veteran players know that the way a story is edited can shape how the public perceives them. If the focus shifts heavily toward rising stars and dramatic rivalries, longtime veterans could find themselves portrayed as obstacles rather than pioneers. And in the entertainment world, conflict often sells better than harmony. All of these factors contribute to the sense that the WNBA is entering a transformational phase. The league that once operated with limited resources and modest media attention is evolving into a far more visible global sports brand. Private charter flights, national advertising campaigns, celebrity endorsements, and international broadcasts are becoming part of the league's new reality. But transitions like this are rarely smooth. Players who spent years building the league's foundation now find themselves navigating a landscape shaped by corporate interests, media storytelling, and the unpredictable momentum of viral popularity. At the center of that storm stands Caitlin Clark herself. Publicly, Clark has handled the attention with remarkable composure. She consistently credits her teammates, avoids fueling controversy, and keeps the focus on basketball. Yet the expectations placed on her are enormous. When networks and sponsors build major marketing strategies around a single player, the pressure becomes immense. Every performance matters. Every headline matters. Every injury risk matters. If a star carrying that level of visibility struggles or misses time, the ripple effects can reach far beyond one team. In Clark's case, those effects would impact her franchise, the Indiana Fever, and potentially the broader media strategy surrounding the league. That's why some analysts believe the discussions behind closed doors were less about controversy and more about risk management. How do you protect the momentum of a league that suddenly finds itself at the center of global attention? How do you balance fairness on the court with the financial realities of modern sports entertainment? And how do you grow the game without dividing the community that built it? Those are the questions shaping the WNBA's next chapter. For much of its history, the league survived thanks to support from the National Basketball Association, operating as a smaller extension of the broader basketball ecosystem. That era may now be ending. With rising ratings, expanding sponsorships, and global interest fueled by players like Caitlin Clark, the WNBA suddenly has a genuine path toward long-term financial independence. But achieving that future will require difficult decisions. The quiet meeting that reportedly took place may have marked the beginning of that transformation. A moment when the league acknowledged that its old model is evolving into something entirely new. The boardroom may have emptied that day, but the consequences of those conversations are still unfolding. Because Caitlin Clark is no longer just a talented rookie. In many ways, she has become the pivot point around which the league's future may rotate. Every broadcast deal, every marketing campaign, and every strategic decision will reflect that reality in one way or another. The real question now is whether the WNBA can harness this momentum in a way that strengthens the sport for everyone involved, or whether the pressure of rapid growth will test the unity that has defined the league for nearly 3 decades. One thing is certain. Women's basketball is entering a new era, and the decisions being made right now will determine whether this revolution elevates the game to unprecedented heights or challenges it in ways no one fully expected.